Okay, let's play some damn chess. But first, chess. You goddamn son of a goddamn bitch.
Let's play
Street
White's
War.
most popular opening after d4, d5, the Queen's Gambit. Nice try, but this move is not the Queen's Gambit. Nice try, but this move is not the Queen's Gambit. Try again. Nice try, but this move is not the Queen. Nice try, but this move is not the. Nice try, but this move is not the Queen's Gambit. Try again. Nice try, but this move is not the Queen's Gambit. Try again.
The goddamn Holy Ghost. Fuck.
Nice try, but this move is not the Queen's Gambit. Try again. Nice try, but this move is not the Queen's Gambit. Try again. Nice try, but this move is. Nice try, but this move is not the Queen's Gambit. Try again.
I'll eventually get fucking something.
Nice try, but this move is not the. Nice try, but this. Excellent. White puts pressure on d5. And nice try, but there is a stronger pawn move to find. Try again. Nice try, but there is a stronger pawn move to find. Nice try, but there is a stronger. Excellent. White puts pressure on d5. Good choice. This solid option gives White a strong position. Can you find a more aggressive move with this pawn that controls more space in the center? Excellent. White puts pressure on d5, and Black decides to capture the c4 pawn, known as the Queen's Gambit accepted. Nice try, but there is a stronger pawn move to find. Try again. Good choice. This solid option. Excellent. Good choice. This solid option gives White a strong position. Can you find a more aggressive move with this pawn that controls more space in the center? Nice try, but there is a stronger pawn move to find. Try. Nice try, but there. Nice try, but there is a stronger pawn move. Nice try, but. Nice try, but there is a. Nice try, but there is a. Nice try, but. Nice try, but there is a. Great job. White takes over the center and is prepared to regain the pawn with bishop takes c4. Black has to be very careful to avoid a bad position. Black defends d5 with c6, turning the game into a slab or semi-slab. Nice try, but this does not develop a knight toward the center. Try again. Black defends d5. Great job. Black also develops a knight into the center. Excellent work. White actively develops both knights into the center. Black decides to turn the game into the slab defense with d takes c. What happens if Black plays bishop f5? Let's capture Black's pawn on d5 to understand how White can. Great job. Black recaptures with a pawn, as otherwise Black gives up control of the center. Can you... Nice try, but there is a stronger queen move that attacks two Black pawns at once. Try again. Powerful play. White attacks both Black's unprotected b7 pawn and the d5 pawn at the same time. Black tries to cover both threats. Nice try, but this move does not win a pawn. Try again. Great move. White captures a pawn, so Black tries to make things complicated with this queen trade. Fantastic in between. White is up a pawn with a great position, which is why Black typically avoids bishop f5. Can you find a strong pawn move that prevents Black from comfortably playing b5? Nice try, but we are looking. Nice try, but we are looking for a pawn move that prevents b5. Try again. Excellent job. White prevents b5. Black moves the bishop to the excellent f5 square. How can White prepare to regain the c4 pawn? Nice try, but this move loses a pawn for White. Try again. We want to regain the c4 pawn without having to trade another pawn. Try again. Nice move. White prepares bishop takes c4 and castling kingside. Both sides will focus on completing development with an interesting game to follow. D takes c allows the Slav defense. Nice try, but this is not the semi-Slav defense. Try again. Nice try, but this is not the semi-Slav defense. Nice try, but this is not the Nice try, but this is not the Nice try, but this is not the semi-Slav defense. Try again. Nice try, but this is not the semi. Nice try. Nice try. Nice try, but this is not the semi-Slav. Nice try, but this is not the semi-Slav. Nice try. Nice try. Nice try, but this is not the semi-Slav. Nice try, but this is not the semi-Slav. Nice try, but this is not. Nice try, but this is not the semi-slap. Nice try, but this. Nice work. Black can play solidly with a move like knight bd7, or play the ultra-sharp d takes c4. Let's play a solid move that unpins our knight on f6, and prepares to castle kingside. Excellent. This safe, solid move turns the position into a queen's gambit declined, and avoids the incredible complexity of the semi-Slav mainline d takes c4. We are in the main line of the queen's gambit declined. Let's castle kingside and learn the main ideas in this. Black castles kingside with a solid position. Nice try, but this. Nice move. Black gains a 10. Nice try, but this does not help develop black's bishop onto the h1a8 diagonal. Try again. By blocking the queen's protection of d5, black. Nice try, but this does. Nice try, but this does not help develop black's bishop onto the h1a8 diagonal. Try again. Great job. Black opens the diagonal so black's light-squared bishop can help control the center from the h1a8 diagonal. Nice try, but this does not activate black's bishop on the h1a8 diagonal. Try again. Great job. Black's light-squared bishop finds an active role on the h1a8 diagonal, helping control the center. Black's main plan is to play knight bd7, followed by preparing c5, adding more pressure to white's center.
Okay, let's play some damn chess. God damn it. Fuck you, suck my slut. I'm not playing no goddamn 10 seconds half arena. Street whore. With Uzi Emily.
Well, that's right. The leaders of this team say what they've found is very exciting.
Man,
and
she
very
smells like
convincing.
spit.
They vanished without a trace. 115 men.
It's very exciting and very convincing.
They vanished without a trace. 115 men, women, and children. No bodies,
Street
no
whore.
graves. Just
From
a single
China.
word carved into a tree. Croatoan.
Street
The secret
whore.
token, as he called it, behind, and this seemed to be the answer. Here was Croatoan carved onto the post.
For centuries, the
Street whore.
disappearance of the Roanoke colony was America's most chilling unsolved mystery.
It is one of America's oldest
Man, it's not
unsolved
the goddamn game,
mysteries,
you
and
goddamn-
it happened
No,
in our
fuck
own
this shit. I just played
backyard.
it, goddamn.
But now, in 2025, scientists have cracked the code, and what they found
fucking damn.
isn't just shocking, it's terrifying. The vanishing. In the summer of 1587, under the searing
God
Atlantic
damn, it's hot
sun,
as fuck.
3 English ships slipped through the shallows and anchored off Roanoke
Suck my
Island, an
dick,
untamed
bitch.
spit of land
You suck
nestled
my
along the
dick,
jagged
bitch.
coast of what is now North Carolina.
Suck
Aboard
my
those ships
slut.
were
You suck
115
my
men,
slut, bitch.
women, and children who stepped onto the New
You
World
suck
soil,
my
not
dick,
as
bitch.
adventurers, but as dreamers, each carrying the fragile
Suck the
hope of a
goddamn
new
game, you son of a
beginning. They were
bitch.
not the first to try. 2 earlier English attempts had already failed, marred by violence, poor supplies, and infighting. But this group, led by the
Goddamn
affable yet
motherfucker.
pragmatic John White, was different. They had brought their families. They had planned for permanence. And among them
bring out
was a
that
newborn
whore.
symbol of that hope. Virginia Dare, John White's granddaughter, and the
Virginia
first English
Dare's
child
mom
born
was
on American
spit
soil.
smell Illinois.
Her birth was celebrated not only as a
Man, I'm
familial
sick and tired
joy,
of the
but as a
goddamn
political
fucking
statement
shit,
that
goddamn
England could root
refresh
itself
my
here.
goddamn
The settlers worked
goddamn son of a
tirelessly under a
goddamn
canopy
bitch.
of pine and oak,
Suck
erecting a
my
modest
dick,
wooden
bitch.
fort, planting crops, and forging fragile ties with local tribes.
suck
The
my
land was
dick,
wild,
bitch.
beautiful, and unforgiving, but they endured. Then, almost as soon as they had arrived,
Suck
White
my
was forced
dick,
to
bitch.
return to England for more
Now
supplies,
fucking move
a
that
voyage
whore
he
right
expected
here.
would take only a few months. But Europe was on fire. England was
Suck
locked
my
in a deadly
dick, bitch.
standoff with Spain, and Queen Elizabeth I had conscripted every available
You
ship
suck my
for the
dick,
fight
bitch.
against the Spanish Armada.
You
White
suck
was
my
stranded for
dick,
3
bitch.
long years, helplessly
suck
watching
my
the calendar
dick, bitch.
move while imagining what might be happening back across the ocean. When he finally returned
You
to
suck
Roanoke
my
in August
dick,
of 1590, the silence was suffocating. The harbor was eerily calm. The fort stood exactly as he had left it. Palisades upright, gates
suck my
unbroken,
motherfucking
structures
dick,
intact.
bitch.
But life was gone. Not a single soul stirred. No laughter, no footsteps, no smoke rising from hearths. The air was heavy, as though the island itself knew what had happened
You
and
suck
refused
my
to speak.
dick, bitch.
There were no
Now
signs of
fuck 'em, my
violence,
name's that move
no
that king
blood,
right here.
no scattered belongings, no graves freshly dug or bones picked clean by time. The only trace of the settlers' fate was carved into wood, the word
Suck
Croatoan
my
on the
dick,
fort's
bitch.
entrance post, and the unfinished letters CRO on a nearby tree. White's heart pounded. That word, Croatoan, was the name of a nearby island, home to a friendly indigenous tribe. The agreed-upon code, in case of emergency relocation, was to carve their destination. There was no cross, no distress symbol. Perhaps,
whore.
he thought, they had moved voluntarily. Perhaps they were safe. But fate did
Move,
not
you
give him a chance
whore.
to know. A violent storm descended as White prepared to
You
set sail for
you
Croatoan.
suck my
His ship's
dick,
anchor
bitch.
broke.
You
Supplies
suck my
dwindled.
dick,
Crew
bitch.
morale collapsed. With a heavy heart, White turned back for England, never to return again.
You suck my dick, bitch.
To this day, his journal remains
Suck
one
my
of the only
slut.
first-hand
You
accounts of
suck
that
my
moment.
dick,
His
bitch.
words tremble with
You
confusion
suck
and
my
restrained
dick,
despair.
bitch.
It was not
You
what he saw
suck
that
my
terrified
dick,
him.
bitch.
It was what he didn't do. And for that, an entire colony, a piece of England transplanted to the New World, vanished without a
Suck
single
my
trace.
dick, bitch.
Buried clues and dead ends. In the
I'm
centuries
fixing
that
to ear you,
followed, Roanoke's fate
stupid!
became
You
a puzzle
should've
no
eared my
historian
rookie,
could
son of a
solve,
bitch.
and no conspiracy theorist could resist. As early as the 1600s, reports emerged from New English settlers further north in Jamestown.
stupid son
They
of a
spoke of
bitch.
strange encounters, tribes with members who spoke broken English, who claimed to descend
Suck my
from white
dick, bitch.
ancestors. Some bore gray eyes, lighter hair, and features uncommon among local nations.
I'm facing
There
that
were
ear,
rumors,
you
too,
rook.
of crude maps
I'm cutting
showing
off your
villages
right ear.
inland with English-style structures.
Stupid!
Buildings laid out in straight lines as if
Stupid!
guided by a western hand, but nothing was ever verified. Every lead ended in ash. In time, more sinister theories arose. Some believed the colonists had been killed by nearby tribes after a breakdown in diplomacy. Others blamed internal conflict, starvation, or harsh winters driving them to cannibalism or madness.
suck my
A
dick,
few theorists pointed fingers at the Spanish, who were known to patrol the Atlantic seaboard, eliminating rival
One
settlements
stupid
in secret.
motherfucker.
Then came the stories of curses, of sacred burial grounds disturbed, of the land itself rejecting the
Suck
foreign
my
settlers
dick, bitch.
like a body fighting infection. Despite
Suck
the
my
lack of
dick,
answers,
bitch.
excavations and studies persisted. Archaeologists
Suck my
scoured the
dick,
island
bitch.
and its surrounding regions. They unearthed shards of pottery, rusted weapons, and beads, items that may have belonged to the colonists, or may
Suck
not.
my dick, bitch.
The line between myth and reality was paper thin.
as the Dare Stone, so
Come on, you
called
suck
because the
my
message
dick,
on the rock is from Eleanor White Dare.
In 1937, the infamous Dare Stone
Suck my
surfaced.
dick, bitch.
Rocks inscribed with supposed messages from Eleanor Dare,
Suck my
Virginia's
dick,
mother.
bitch.
The first stone told of disease, death, and Eleanor's
You
grief.
suck my dick.
The
bitch.
story captivated the nation. More stones followed.
You
Too
suck
many.
my dick.
Eventually, scholars labeled most, if not all,
You
as fakes.
You suck my
Hope
dick.
gave way once again to disillusionment. Yet something about the Roanoke colony's
You
disappearance refused
suck
to
my
die.
dick, bitch.
It haunted the American imagination. It was a blank canvas of just enough truth to inspire speculation and just enough
Suck
absence
my
to sustain
dick, bitch.
legend. Centuries passed. Technologies advanced. DNA studies were proposed. LiDAR scans and ground-penetrating radar combed the Carolinian
Suck
coast.
my dick, bitch.
But the mystery remained
You
unsolved.
suck my dick.
An entire
bitch.
community vanished into the woods in waves, and in their place, only
You
questions.
suck my dick, bitch.
The map that held a secret. It began, as many great historical discoveries do, with something small. In 2012, a curious
You
researcher
suck
at the
my
British
dick.
Museum
You
was
suck
carefully
my
analyzing
dick,
a
bitch.
16th century watercolor
You
map
suck my
titled
dick,
La
bitch.
Virginia Pars, crafted by the English artist and explorer John White. The map, delicate
Suck my
and sun-faded,
Now
had long been an
suck my
object of scholarly interest. But that day, something peculiar caught the researcher's eye. An anomaly beneath a patch of paper,
Suck
barely
my
visible
dick, bitch.
unless you knew precisely where to look. Using backlighting, an old technique for detecting underdrawings and erasures, they saw it.
You
The
suck.
faint but
You
unmistakable
suck. You
outline of a
suck
square-shaped
my dick,
fort,
bitch.
carefully etched beneath the surface.
You
Hidden
suck
beneath a
my
patch
dick,
near the
bitch.
confluence of the Roanoke and Chowan rivers, the symbol was drawn in invisible ink,
You
or
suck
possibly
my
an
dick.
iron gall
You
composition
suck my
that had
dick,
faded
bitch.
over centuries. What made this discovery so extraordinary
Suck my
wasn't just
dick,
the
bitch.
clandestine nature of the marking, it was its location, exactly 50 miles west of Roanoke Island. That distance was not random. It corresponded with a cryptic note in John White's own journals, written before he returned to England in 1587. In it, White recorded that the Roanoke colonists, who would later vanish without a trace, had intended to move 50 miles into the Maine. That phrase, long dismissed or overshadowed by the mystery of the word Croatoan, carved into a tree, suddenly gained new weight. Why had White hidden this fort? Theories swirled among historians. Some believed he intended to protect the colony's location from Spanish spies, who were actively scouring the Americas to undermine English settlements. Others wondered if White himself never returned because he feared what he might find: failure, disease, or something worse. A map, a seemingly benign artifact, had become a cipher for the mystery of America's first lost colony. The discovery electrified the archaeological world. Soon after, the North Carolina-based First Colony Foundation, a group dedicated to solving the mystery of Roanoke, decided to act. Under the direction of renowned archaeologist Nick Lucchetti, they began an investigation into this new location, an area along the Albemarle Sound in Bertie County, North Carolina. This promising site was soon given an ominous and hopeful new name: Site X. Site X and the Ghosts of Bertie. The dig at Site X began with great anticipation, but not without skepticism. The terrain, thick with pine forest and tangled underbrush, bore little resemblance to the traditional image of an English fort. And as the excavation expanded, the team found no palisade walls, no trenches, no barracks, nothing that screamed fort. But then, something. Just beyond the boundaries of an abandoned Native American village known as Metachem, the soil began to yield secrets. Unearthed beneath centuries of sediment were fragments of English pottery, distinctly dated to the late 1500s. These weren't ceremonial or trade items, they were utilitarian. Bowls, storage jars, and cooking pots, many glazed in the characteristic greenish tint of Surrey, Hampshire wares from Elizabethan England. And one detail stood out more than any other. There were no clay pipes. This absence spoke volumes. The settlers of Jamestown, founded in 1607, were famously fond of clay tobacco pipes, which often littered their refuse pits. The Roanoke colonists, however, predated that trend. Their lack here wasn't an oversight, it was a timestamp. This discovery marked something radical. The pottery didn't just suggest English presence, it hinted at habitation. These weren't casual visitors or lost stragglers. Someone had lived here, cooked here, stored food, and settled, at least for a while. As interest in the region grew, the team deployed ground-penetrating radar to survey the surrounding area. That's when a second promising location came to light, just 2 miles away, a place they would later call Site Y. Again, the soil offered up quiet but powerful testimony. This time, the artifacts were broader in scope. Fragments of European ceramics from different regions, suggesting a mixing of cultural origins. This introduced a new possibility, one that had rarely been considered in such detail before. A scenario began to take shape in the minds of researchers. It was not a tale of a single lost colony, but of dispersal. A desperate and intelligent attempt to integrate, adapt, and endure in the harsh and unfamiliar terrain. Some may have embedded themselves in local tribes like the Croatan. Others may have ventured further inland to build makeshift settlements under the cover of secrecy, possibly under the protection of allies or sympathetic native leaders. Site X and Site Y, separated by a sliver of forest and 4 centuries of time, began whispering of a story lost to colonial records. A story not of failure, but of fragmentation. Not of disappearance, but of transformation. And the deeper they dug, the more it seemed that Roanoke's disappearance wasn't a single moment in history, but a mosaic of choices, survival, and quiet endurance. The Hatteras dig, another side of the story. As Site X continued to dominate the headlines with its tantalizing clues and scholarly debates, a quieter but equally compelling excavation was unfolding over 200 miles to the southeast, on the windswept, salt-sprayed sands of Hatteras Island. Once known as Croatoan, this island had always whispered legends of a different fate for the lost colonists. And now, those whispers were being unearthed in the most literal way possible. At the center of this excavation was British archaeologist Mark Horton, working in tandem with the Croatoan Archaeological Society, a local team led by island native Scott Dawson.
Suck my cock.
Unlike Site X, where artifacts hinted at relocation, the Hatteras' findings told a story of assimilation. Among the windswept dunes and beneath layers of shifting coastal soil, they unearthed unmistakable signs of English presence. A rusted rapier hilt, corroded gun parts, and most remarkably, a slate writing tablet still bearing the faint scratches of English script. These weren't random relics.
Suck my
They were
fucking
deliberate,
cock.
human, purposeful, left behind by people who were clearly living on the island, not just passing through. Even more compelling was the island's oral tradition, passed down for generations among the Lumbee and other native communities. These stories, long dismissed by mainstream academia as myth or romanticism, claimed that white settlers had joined with the native Croatan people, forming families,
Suck my
building
dick.
lives, and adapting to their new home. Until now, those stories had remained just that, stories. But the artifacts told a tale that echoed those voices from the past, lending credibility to what had long been marginalized as folklore. Scott Dawson's
Now,
2020
fucking
book,
king right
The
here.
Lost Colony and Hatteras Island, documented these findings in detail. His argument was provocative. The colony didn't vanish. It fractured. Some may have gone inland, toward Site
Stupid
X,
fucker.
but others, perhaps more than previously imagined,
Sucker.
integrated
You
with the
fell
indigenous
like a
communities
sack
on
of bricks of
Croatoan
shit.
itself.
Each brick weighing a ton
They
of
weren't
shit,
lost.
stupid
They were
fucker.
simply hiding in plain sight, camouflaged by history's neglect. This raised an
March!
even more daring possibility.
Stu.
What if
stupid
both
idiot.
stories, Site X and
stupid
Hatteras,
idiot.
were true?
The stupid
What if the
idiot.
lost colony didn't
the
collapse,
stupid
but
idiot.
evolved?
The stupid
The science
idiot.
of the lost.
The stupid idiot.
To truly
Stu,
explore
stu,
this theory,
stupid idiot.
scientists knew they had to go beyond shovels and maps. This
Suck
wasn't
my
just
dick,
archaeology anymore. It was forensic investigation across centuries.
Suck
And so
my
began the
motherfucking
next
slut.
phase. High-tech detective work. Using ground-penetrating radar,
I got
teams were
one
able
word
to
of
detect
advice.
subterranean
I got one word of
anomalies
advice
without
for you,
disturbing the
slut.
fragile landscape.
Resign.
Then came LiDAR,
Slut.
a technology that strips away vegetation in digital scans to reveal ancient structures and landscape changes long hidden by time. These tools revealed patterns, post holes, fence lines, old hearths that suggested long-term settlement activity in areas previously thought empty. But the most chilling insights came from the artifacts themselves. Researchers compared pottery shards, tools, and remnants from
dick
sites
sucker,
X, Y,
you
and
dick
Hatteras,
sucker from
hoping to
China.
draw connections or spot inconsistencies. What they found flipped the timeline upside down. Unlike artifacts from Jamestown or Plymouth, where clay tobacco pipes,
Suck my
post-1600 ceramics, and distinct European wares are common, none of those markers
stupid
appeared at the
motherfucker.
Roanoke-associated sites. Instead, the materials were consistent with a pre-1600
Stupid
English
fucker.
presence, precisely when the Roanoke settlers would have disappeared. This meant one thing. These
fucker.
weren't just traces of later colonial
Come on,
movement.
you stupid
These were the Roanoke
fucker.
colonists themselves. Then came the bombshell, DNA analysis, buried in the genetic code of local indigenous communities.
Stupid fucker.
Scientists began to find markers consistent with Western European ancestry, dating back centuries. Not the result of later
Suck my
European
dick,
mingling,
bitch.
but something far older. Something that aligned suspiciously well with the timeline of 1587. And that's when the researchers said it, quietly at first. Then with a rising tremor of realization, this was terrifying. If the implications were true, everything we thought we knew about early American history,
now
Jamestown in
I'm thinking to get myself a
1607,
whore.
Plymouth in 1620, the Mayflower mythology
goddamn whore.
might not be the beginning at all. The true first chapter may have been written by a group of colonists who had already been declared dead, but they hadn't perished. They lived, they adapted, and then they vanished from memory. Skeptics versus believers. For every breakthrough unearthed in the red North Carolina soil, a fresh debate seemed to rise from it like smoke. The mystery of the lost colony wasn't just a historical enigma. It had become an ideological battlefield. On one side were the believers, convinced the evidence told a coherent story. On the other were skeptics, scholars and scientists, who saw the findings not as revelations, but as riddles. Dr. Charles Ewan, a veteran archaeologist, was among the most vocal critics. He accused the researchers of confirmation bias,
I got
warning
one
that the
word
pursuit had
advice
become
for you.
less about objective
Stop.
discovery and more about vindicating long-held
Ain't no
theories.
way.
They're trying to
Ain't
prove a
no
theory,
theory.
he famously said in a 2019
Unless-
interview. Not disprove it. That's
Something
dangerous to
incredibly
science.
fucked up.
Then there was Scott Dawson, a Croatoan native and historian whose family had lived on Hatteras Island for generations. To him, the answer had always been obvious. The colonists had integrated with the Croatoan tribe. There were oral histories, linguistic overlaps, and even genetic hints to confirm this theory. They went to Croatoan, he insisted, not deep inland into hostile territory. Site X, Dawson argued, was not only too far, over 50 miles from Roanoke Island, but it was also surrounded by groups the colonists had previously antagonized. It would have been suicide. Yet, within the First Colony Foundation itself, the very organization spearheading the search, consensus was elusive. One camp pushed the split colony theory, that the settlers divided, with some seeking refuge with friendly tribes along the coast and others venturing inland. Another camp dismissed the inland theory altogether, arguing that any European artifacts found there might have belonged to earlier exploratory missions, perhaps even a scouting party sent before the main 1587 group. The artifacts, however, told a murkier story. A silver ring with a lion crest, a rapier hilt, unmistakably European, fragments of pottery chemically linked to 16th century English kilns, enough to tantalize, not enough to confirm. Still, as the years wore on, skepticism began to bend. New technologies like ground-penetrating radar, drone-assisted mapping, and DNA sequencing added fresh tools to the archaeologist's toolkit. Radiocarbon dating got more precise. Soil analysis became more granular, and year by year, artifact by artifact, the evidence kept accumulating, quietly, stubbornly, like whispers from the past refusing to be ignored. And then, in 2025, the whispers turned into a roar. The 2025 breakthrough. The dig site was unassuming, a patch of dry earth near the banks of the Chowan River, just miles from the elusive Site X. It was a cold February morning, and the First Colony Foundation team had little reason to expect anything groundbreaking, until they found her. The burial was unmistakably Christian. The skeleton lay supine, head facing west, feet pointing east, the traditional orientation meant to face the rising sun on Resurrection Day. There were no grave goods, no elaborate markings, just the bones, weathered by time but intact. A quiet dignity lingered in the way she had been laid to rest. But what changed everything was the DNA. Mitochondrial analysis revealed she was of European descent, and she was female. The implications hit the team like a thunderclap. The all-male 1585 Roanoke expedition ruled out. The Jamestown settlers, they came years later and had no record of traveling this far inland. This woman didn't arrive with explorers. She had lived and died there, which meant others must have too. For centuries, the phrase "the lost colony" had conjured images of mass disappearance, of settlers swallowed whole by the wilderness. But now, with the discovery of this single grave, the narrative was being rewritten in real time. "This is terrifying," one archaeologist was heard whispering through tears. "Not just because we found her, but because now we know others were there too." The settlers hadn't vanished. They hadn't been killed off in a single blow. They had moved. They had adapted. They had survived. By now, the breadcrumbs have taken us to two possible destinations and two very different fates. The mounting archaeological and linguistic evidence points to a split migration. It appears the colonists, once united under the impossible dream of building a New England in a harsh, unfamiliar world,
I didn't say bishop, I said
pressure.
bishop.
Some,
Not
perhaps the most
B-I-S-H-O-P,
desperate or
but
pragmatic among
B-I-S-H-I-T.
them, made their way southeast to Hatteras Island. There, among the Croatan tribe, they may have found an uneasy sanctuary. Traces of English-style tools, fragments of European pottery, and even genetic hints in the descendants of native families have all converged on this theory.
Come on, you
The
whore.
Croatan, known for their relative openness, may have allowed the weary settlers to integrate, though not without profound cultural loss on both sides. This was not assimilation out of ambition. It was a quiet surrender to necessity. Others, it seems, ventured inland, toward the dense woodlands around Metaquem, farther into the wilderness. Perhaps they sought autonomy, a fresh start, or simply a place to vanish. Inland, they could disappear from the grasp of potential rescuers, but also from the maps of history. Their decision, in all likelihood, was not guided by strategy or ambition. It was sheer survival. The colony had been ravaged by too many silent enemies, drought that turned their crops to dust, disease that had no cure, and starvation that tested every moral boundary. Add to that the omnipresent fear of attack from native tribes or even Spanish forces, and perhaps the most fatal threat of all, internal fractures, disagreements, divisions. Fear erodes unity faster than any enemy at the gates. When trust dissolved, so did the colony. So, they did what desperate people always do when faced with the end. They ran, not as one, but in scattered threads, some to the sea, some to the trees, and all disappeared. The mystery that made America. The lost colony is more than a mystery. It's a parable written in vanishing ink. For centuries, we treated it like a historical hiccup, an unresolved curiosity buried in textbooks. But the story of Roanoke is something far more intimate. It's the American origin story most people have never truly heard. Not because it lacked significance, but because the voices were quiet. Silenced by time, by nature, by indifference. And yet, within this silence lies a story of breathtaking depth, of fear, yes, but also of resilience, of courage, of people who risked everything to carve a future from untamed soil, and who, in their final days, made impossible decisions with unimaginable consequences. This is a story about survival and the price of it. About how cultures collided, then blurred.
No, he was not a good.
How fragile memory is in a world where no statues are raised, where no graves are marked. When the only monument is a word, Croatoan, carved in the bones of a dying settlement. What makes this terrifying isn't that we didn't know. It's that we almost didn't ask. Centuries passed while the bones of this mystery lay hidden in tree roots and riverbeds. But in 2025, science whispered back. Genetic testing, ground-penetrating radar, linguistic reconstructions, all converging to reveal what oral traditions had tried to preserve for generations. They weren't lost. Not really. We just stopped listening. And what we nearly lost was more than a colony. It was our capacity to remember. Our ability to care. To connect dots between vanished footprints and the people who made them. Because if the first Americans to vanish could be erased this easily, who else have we forgotten? That is the true legacy of Roanoke. Not the disappearance itself, but the ease with which history can let go. What if the colonists were never lost, just waiting to be found? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching this video with us, and catch you in the next one.
You suck my whore ass dick. Street whore. Suck my slut. You suck my dick, bitch. You suck my dick, bitch. You suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick. Dick. Dick.
When we imagine the threats faced by early humans, we tend to think in primal terms: claw, tooth, and fang. Giant beasts stalking the plains, cold nights in caves lit by firelight and fear. And yet, for all the terrifying creatures that once roamed the Pleistocene world, the most dangerous predator was never a saber-tooth, nor a cave bear. It was another human, or at least something very close. For most of our species' history, Earth was not a stage, something very close. For most of our species' history, Earth was not a stage for a single actor. We were never alone. Homo sapiens shared time and territory with a surprising number of human cousins. Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo floresiensis, and others we're only beginning to uncover. But there's one in particular who leaves behind not just tools and bones, but troubling questions. Questions about violence, about power, and about who we really are at our core. That species is Homo heidelbergensis, often referred to as the last common ancestor of modern humans. Neanderthals, and possibly Denisovans. They lived across Europe, Africa, and Western Asia between 700,000 and 200,000 years ago during the Middle Pleistocene. This period was heavily marked by climate change, with ice ages succeeding one after the other, transforming green zones into frozen wastelands in a matter of a few thousand years. Earth saw some of the most violent climate swings in history. In Europe and Asia, Homo heidelbergensis faced glacial advances that could wipe out entire ecosystems. In Africa, sudden droughts would parch rivers and split habitats. Every resource, meat, water, shelter, became scarce. And heidelbergensis had the means to impose himself on the competitors. They were beings built like tanks,
Get your ass
broad-shouldered,
back
thick-boned,
to Africa.
and standing as tall as we do.
Get
With a
your
brain size approaching
ass
ours,
back to
they weren't just
Africa.
brutes. They were smart, social, and technically
Get your
skilled. Make no
ass
mistake, Homo
back to
heidelbergensis
Africa.
didn't rise to dominance in a world free of danger. They weren't the apex predator by default. They had to earn it. Their world was filled with creatures that could kill with one swipe, one bite, one pounce. In Africa, they shared territory with giant archaic hyenas, saber-toothed cats like Homo therium, and the now extinct African giant crocodile. In Europe, they contended with Eurasian cave lions, larger than today's lions, and short-faced bears that could stand over 3 meters tall and probably decapitate 3 people at the same time with one paw sweep. In colder crocodile, cats like Homo therium, and the now extinct African giant crocodile. In Europe, they contended and the now extinct
You stupid motherfucker. You stupid motherfucker. Stu. You stupid motherfucker. You stupid motherfucker. You have just fucked up big time, you son of a bitch. You, my dear sir, have just fucked up. You, my dear sir, have just fucked up. You, my dear sir, have just fucked up. I'm fixing to stick my cock up your asshole and up your butt and twist like a slut. You suck my dick, bitch. You suck my dick, bitch. You suck my dick, bitch. Suck my dick. Suck my fucking dick. You suck my dick, bitch. God fucking damn it. $25 motherfucking feet long. God damn it. Move, you whore. 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 Would you please move, you whore? Move, you whore. Move, you whore. Move, whore. Move, you whore.
African giant crocodile. In Europe, they contended with Eurasian cave lions, larger than today's lions, and short-faced bears that could stand over 3 meters tall and probably decapitate 3 people at the same time with one paw sweep. In colder climates, packs of wolves, megaboars, and even steppe mammoths were potential threats if injured or cornered, which Heidelbergensis probably did on a frequent basis. But beside these usual threats, they also might have been the greatest one of them all. The first humans to systematically hunt their own kind.
You suck my
And we
dick,
don't
bitch.
mean metaphorically. Across multiple archaeological sites in Europe and Africa, a disturbing pattern emerges. Skulls with signs of blunt force trauma, bones scraped clean of flesh, burn marks, tool cut marks in places that suggest not ritual, not respect, but butchery. At first, these seemed isolated, maybe even explainable by desperate times. But as more evidence surfaced, a darker possibility came into focus. What if Homo heidelbergensis wasn't just a survivor, but a predator of its own species? This wasn't some post-apocalyptic scenario. These were humans, thinking, tool-using, fire-making humans,
Come
who
on,
may have
dick
seen
sucker.
rival bands not just as competition, but as prey.
Come
And
on,
if that's
you
true,
dick sucker.
then the origins of war, murder, and conquest might go back much farther than civilization.
Come on, you dick
They may
sucker.
lie buried in the caves of Atapuerca, in the blood-soaked soil of
Come
prehistoric
on, dick
Africa,
sucker.
in the very roots of our family tree. It raises the kind of question
Come
that
on, you dick
lingers.
sucker.
What if humanity's greatest predator has always been itself? In
Please
this video,
move, you
we'll dig
dick
into the
sucking
physical
child.
remains,
You
the tools,
Oriental
the trauma,
prostitute.
and the
You
eerie patterns
Oriental
of behavior
prostitute.
that point to
You
a reality
Japanese
as
prostitute.
fascinating as
You
it is
Japanese
horrifying.
whore.
We'll meet a species that may have wielded fire in one hand and a weapon in the other, capable of compassion one day and cold-blooded violence the next. Because to understand where we come from is not just to trace our achievements, our art, our language, our civilization, but to confront the darker legacies too. The ones that still echo in us, long after the bones have turned to dust. The sinister secrets of Cima de los Huesos. Deep within the Atapuerca Mountains of northern Spain lies a site that has both fascinated and unsettled
I think I
archaeologists.
can get his goddamn
Cima
black
de
ass
los
from
Huesos,
checkmate.
or the Pit of Bones.
Nah, that fucking...
This cavernous chasm has yielded an unparalleled collection of hominin fossils, offering a window into the lives and deaths of our ancient relatives. Over 7,000 human bones, representing at least 28 individuals, have been meticulously excavated from this site. These remains are predominantly attributed to Homo heidelbergensis, a species considered a common ancestor of both Neanderthals and modern humans. The sheer number of individuals and the nature of their deposition have led researchers to ponder the circumstances that led to their accumulation in this subterranean sepulchre. One of the most striking findings is the presence of multiple skulls bearing signs of trauma. Notably, cranium 17 exhibits 2 distinct perimortem fractures on the frontal bone, injuries that would have been fatal. The positioning and nature of these wounds suggest they were inflicted intentionally, possibly indicating interpersonal violence or ritualistic behavior among these ancient humans. The discovery of a meticulously crafted quartzite hand axe, dubbed Excalibur, alongside the skeletal remains, adds another layer of intrigue. Some researchers propose that this artifact may have been a grave offering, hinting at complex cognitive and cultural practices. However, the true purpose of the hand axe and the reasons behind the accumulation of bodies in Cima de los Huesos remain subjects of ongoing debate. Echoes of violence. The Bodo cranium. Thousands of kilometers away, in the Middle Awash Valley of Ethiopia, another enigmatic discovery sheds light on the behaviors of early hominins. The Bodo cranium, unearthed in 1976, is a 600,000-year-old fossil attributed to Homo heidelbergensis. This skull presents compelling evidence of deliberate defleshing. Numerous cut marks, consistent with stone tool use, are etched into the bone. Notably,
This motherfucker
these incisions
tried to
are
trick me
concentrated
with his
around
goddamn
muscle
knife.
attachment sites,
I'll take
suggesting
that
a
fucking
systematic removal of flesh shortly after death. The intent behind this defleshing remains a topic of scholarly inquiry. While some posit that it may represent an early form of mortuary practice, others contend that it could indicate cannibalistic behavior. The lack of associated faunal remains makes it challenging to determine whether this act was driven by ritualistic motives or survival necessities.
Man, come on,
A
you
broader
stupid
pattern
horror
of
monger.
cannibalism? The evidence from Cima de los Huesos and the Bodo site is not isolated. Other archaeological
Suck my
findings suggest
dick,
that
bitch.
cannibalism may have been more widespread among ancient hominins than previously thought. For instance, a 1.45 million-year-old tibia, discovered in northern Kenya, exhibits cut marks indicative of flesh removal, potentially representing one of the earliest instances of hominin cannibalism. The species responsible for this act remains unidentified, but the evidence underscores
Suck
the
my
complexity
whore
of
ass
interactions among early human ancestors. Furthermore, studies have assessed the caloric value of the human body to understand the potential nutritional motivations behind cannibalism.
You suck my
Findings
whore ass
suggest
dick.
that while human flesh could provide a source of protein and fat, it is less energy-rich compared to larger fauna, like mammoths or bison. This raises questions about whether cannibalistic acts were primarily driven by dietary needs, or if they served other social or ritualistic purposes. Interpreting the evidence. The recurring instances of skeletal trauma and cut marks across various sites point to a complex tapestry of behaviors among ancient hominins. While some evidence may suggest survival cannibalism during periods of resource scarcity, other findings hint at ritualistic practices or acts of intergroup conflict.
Suck my dick, bitch.
The intentional defleshing of the Bodo cranium and the traumatic injuries observed in the Cima de los Huesos assemblage suggest that Homo heidelbergensis engaged in behaviors that, while difficult to interpret fully, indicate a nuanced
Suck my
understanding of
dick,
life,
bitch.
death, and perhaps even an early form of social or ritualistic conduct. These findings compel us to confront the multifaceted nature of our evolutionary history, acknowledging that the path to modern humanity
Suck my
was shaped
dick,
by a
bitch.
spectrum of behaviors, some of which mirror the complexities of human interactions today. In the evolutionary arms race
Suck
of
my
survival,
dick, bitch.
early humans developed an array of tools that not only facilitated hunting, but also played pivotal roles in defense, and, potentially, in conflicts with other human groups. The sophistication and variety of these implements provide profound insights into the cognitive and social advancements of our ancestors.
Suck my whore ass dick.
The Schoningen spears, mastery of wooden weaponry,
Suck
one
my
of the most
dick,
remarkable
bitch.
archaeological discoveries shedding light on early human hunting capabilities is the unearthing of wooden spears at Schoningen, Germany. Dating back approximately 300,000 years, these spears are attributed to Homo heidelbergensis, or early Neanderthals. Crafted predominantly from spruce, the spears measure about 2 meters in length and exhibit a design optimized for balance and aerodynamics, suggesting they were used as throwing weapons. The meticulous construction of these spears indicates a high level of craftsmanship and an understanding of material properties. The distribution of weight, with the center of gravity positioned forward, implies they were designed for flight, enabling hunters to strike prey from a distance. This technological innovation not only enhanced hunting efficiency, but also reduced the risk associated with close encounters with large and potentially dangerous animals. Stone-tipped
Come on, dick
projectiles,
sucker.
a leap in hunting technology. The integration of stone tips onto wooden shafts marked a significant advancement in hunting technology. Evidence from the Gadamata Formation
Suck
in
my
Ethiopia
dick, bitch.
reveals that hominins were crafting stone-tipped projectiles as early as 279,000 years ago. These
Suck my
javelins
dick,
predate
bitch.
the emergence of Homo sapiens and are indicative of the technological prowess of species such as Homo heidelbergensis.
Suck my dick.
Attaching stone points to wooden shafts, a process known as hafting, required complex cognitive abilities and fine motor skills. It involved selecting appropriate materials. There's a story you've been living your whole life without ever being told. A story older than agriculture, older than writing, older than cities, pyramids, or kings. A story not about war or conquest, One that sounds more like a deal. Not the kind you make in a marketplace. The kind you make around a fire, in the dead of winter, with you hanging on dear life by the skin of your teeth. And the other party in this deal? As you'd not expect, they weren't human. And I'm not talking about a deal with the devil at Crossroads. They just had sharper teeth, better hearing, better eyesight, especially at night, and they used to eat you for lunch. But someday, God knows why, this status quo changed, roughly 30,000 years ago, deep in the Paleolithic wilds. A quiet revolution took place. Two species, once enemies, made a truce. One would trade loyalty for leftovers. The other, safety for scraps. Both would gain way more than any prediction could have foreseen. If we had to evaluate the two species, once enemies, made a truce. One would trade loyalty for leftovers. The other, safety for scraps. Both would gain way more than any prediction could have foreseen. If we had to evaluate the success of this deal by the number of individuals now alive and thriving of both species, this would probably make it one of the most successful deal ever made. And that ancient deal gave us something no other creature on Earth had ever managed. An alliance with one of our own predators. This is the story of how humans and dogs changed each other, and together reshaped the world. The wolf at the
Suck
edge of
my
the fire.
dick, bitch, you goddamn
To understand how
motherfucker.
this all started, we need to rewind to a time when
Goddamn
humans were just
motherfucker.
another struggling primate trying to outsmart nature. And to be frank, 30,000 years ago, we weren't that good at it. Back in the Upper Paleolithic, we actually had quite a hard time. The climate of the period in Europe saw dramatic changes, and included the last glacial maximum, the coldest phase of the last glacial period, which lasted from about 26,500 to 19,000, being coldest at the end, before relatively rapid warming. During the maximum,
God damn it.
most of northern Europe was covered by an ice sheet, forcing human populations into the areas known as last glacial maximum refugia, including modern Italy and the Balkans, parts of the Iberian Peninsula, and areas around the Black Sea. On top of this harsh climate was the fauna. Choices were plenty, but nonetheless dangerous. Prey included aurochs, woolly mammoths and rhinos, and other animals that, coupled with a sort of rudimentary hunting technology composed of spears mostly, could mean certain death. We also fell prey to large predators. In valleys, we faced cave lions and cave hyenas. In forest areas, it was even worse, as it was brown and cave bears territory. At the time, the total human population on Earth was estimated to have been between 1 and 5 million people. That's not just one city's worth of people. It's humanity entirely. Spread very thinly across continents, living in small bands of hunter-gatherers, likely 20 to 50 individuals per group, moving with the seasons, chasing game and survival. To put it in perspective, a modern football stadium can hold 100,000 people. That means all of humanity back then could fit into 50 stadiums, or fewer. If you really want to put it into perspective, more people attended the celebration of General Douglas MacArthur after he was relieved of duty by President Harry Truman. More people waited for the appearance of Pope John Paul II at World Youth Day 1995. More people celebrated Argentina national football team's victory at the 2022 FIFA World Cup. That's how insanely few people there was on Earth at the time. Back then, the world was made of vast empty spaces, where a single human footprint might not be followed by another for weeks. This is typically a sense that we pretty much lost, unless you get to go on a daily basis in space or into the abyss. And yet,
Come on, you dick sucker. Will you please
somehow,
move, you
from
dick
those
sucker?
scattered few, a relationship was born, with a predator no less,
Suck my dick,
that would
bitch.
grow to touch billions of lives. And maybe the reason this deal was made is that you couldn't really count on many others to help you out. So you gotta find someone that will come, no matter what. Wild, huh? Homo sapiens weren't dominant yet. We lived in small bands. No farming, no metal. Just stone tools, fire, and whatever we could hunt or scavenge. People were insanely lean back then, and had physiques comparable to those of modern athletes, and I mean everyone. And out there with us were wolves. They too lived in packs, ate whatever they could manage to find, and also relied on communication as a crucial part of survival. At some point, these common traits would bring us closer than we ever thought we could be to another species. These wolves were not the shaggy golden retrievers you might be picturing, and at first, it was quite literally more of a win-win deal than a process of taming. We're talking lean, ruthless Pleistocene wolves, built for long-distance killing. They competed with us for the same prey. Hell, sometimes they competed for us. They competed with us for the same prey.
Damn, he's eating his goddamn
sometimes
intestines.
they competed for us. And yet, not all wolves behaved the same way. Some were bolder. Others, curious. A few lingered near human camps, not to attack, but to sniff out scraps, not really fearing the big monkey next to the fire. What could it do anyway? No fangs, no claws, no fur. In this Pleistocene world, we were basically helpless. Now here's where natural selection steps in. Because those wolves that kept a respectful distance from humans, they got to eat, without getting speared. In the saying, survival of the fittest, being the most fit here was a matter of socialization and being less aggressive to a potential lunch, which is quite counterintuitive. And over generations, these proto-wolves, less aggressive, more tolerant, were rewarded as they got closer to our fires. They stopped being just wolves. They didn't domesticate dogs by capturing and breeding them. They domesticated themselves in a way. Because you don't really tame a creature that could kill you in one bite to the neck, and whose instinct is pretty much to do so the first chance it gets. They evolved to read us, follow us, understand us.
God damn it.
And we, perhaps unknowingly, selected for those traits every time we tossed a bone. It was the original win-win. They got calories, we got early warning systems, fur heaters, and one day, hunting partners. Or at least that's one theory. A more recent one suggests that the first wolves to ever have been domesticated were pups, either just found in their den and taken away, or purposely stolen from their parents. Of these two theories, one suggests that it's pure luck, really. The other implies intent of domestication, and a thought process complex enough to picture situation use for these domesticated wolves. Once again, we unfortunately don't quite have the definitive proof that will tip the scales in favor of one or the other. But the results are here. From strangers to strategists. Once the first trust was built, something remarkable happened. Cooperation. Humans began to notice that dogs had a way better sense of smell. They could track prey by scent, from miles away.
Jesus goddamn cunt,
dogs
fucking
realized
goddamn
humans could finish the kill and not take any risk doing it themselves, so why bother? Together they became a hunting machine neither could have managed alone, or even in a group of just our own.
Damn it.
And soon, it spread to more than just hunting. Dogs, having kept their territorial instincts, started to protect camps.
God
they barked at
damn
intruders, whatever might they be. They sensed danger coming from other predators like bears, big cats, or even other humans with more malevolent intentions. A human could finally fall asleep with a dog nearby, and not fear of becoming a prey. Very rapidly, a group with dogs piled up competitive advantages over others that didn't have any. Dogs enabled us to be more mobile during hunts, more coordinated, and better fed than others. And in the brutal lottery of Pleistocene Ice Age survival, that mattered. This wasn't just companionship. This was an arms race. The tribes with dogs were faster, safer, more successful.
God
the ones
damn it.
without encountered more
God
risk
damn
during
fucking
hunting sessions
Christ.
and in their daily lives. They
Jesus
slowly got out of
fucking
here.
Christ.
You can think of early dogs as a kind of living technology,
Jesus
a biological
goddamn
tool
cunt, fucking
humans plugged
Christ.
into their survival strategy. I mean, if you ever played any game where you could get a
Get his
non-human
goddamn
companion,
head off it.
You know what I mean for
Jesus
sure.
goddamn fucking rematch, you goddamn son of a bitch.
And the results were so successful. We never looked back. The first domestication
Goddamn
changed our
fucking
brains.
goddamn Christ.
Most animals we've domesticated came after we settled down.
Jesus
Goats,
fucking
cows,
goddamn
chickens.
Christ.
Those came with men settling down and the birth of farming around 10,000 years ago, because we could keep them in
goddamn
place,
fucking
restrict
Christ.
their movements, do selective breeding.
Jesus goddamn.
But are another story.
Goddamn
They were there first,
fucking goddamn
even before
Christ.
humans started to adopt a more sedentary lifestyle.
Jesus goddamn
And they didn't
Christ.
just change how we hunted. They also changed us as a
Goddamn
whole,
Christ.
to a level we would not even have apprehended. Researchers studying domestication have uncovered something strange. When you selectively
Jesus
breed animals for
goddamn
tameness,
Christ.
you don't just get friendlier behavior, you get a full-body makeover. Traits like floppy ears, shorter snouts, small... Researchers studying domestication have uncovered something strange. When you selectively breed animals for tameness, you don't just get friendlier behavior, you get a full-body makeover. Traits like floppy ears, shorter snouts, smaller teeth,
That's
softer
God-
features,
That's goddamn
and even
Holy
changes
Ghost
in
game.
hormone levels and brain structure tend to show up together.
Holy goddamn ghost.
This phenomenon, known as domestication syndrome, was most famously demonstrated in the Siberian fox experiment,
Holy
led by
Ghost.
Soviet geneticist Dmitry Belyaev in the 1950s. Over generations of selecting foxes purely for friendliness toward humans, his team, later led by Lyudmila Trut, found that not only did the foxes grow tamer, but they also developed curly tails, spotted coats, and a surprising eagerness for human attention. The leading explanation behind this cluster of traits is the neural crest cell hypothesis, proposed in a 2014 paper by Adam Wilkins, Richard Wrangham, and William Tecumseh Fitch. Neural crest cells are a group of embryonic cells that influence
Please,
everything
goddamn
from pigment to
motherfucker.
skull shape to the development of the adrenal glands. So when
Holy
selection
goddamn
pressure
ghost.
reduces stress reactivity, essentially
Holy
makes
Ghost.
animals less fearful
Holy
and aggressive,
Ghost.
it inadvertently
Holy-
makes a wide array of
Holy
physical features
Ghost.
too. But here's where the story turns inward. In that same 2014 study, and expanded in later work by Wrangham, scientists
Holy
proposed
Ghost.
that Homo sapiens may have undergone a process of self-domestication. Unlike animals bred by
Holy
humans,
Ghost.
we may have selected among ourselves for individuals who were less reactive, more cooperative, and better suited for complex
Suck
social
my
life.
dick, bitch.
Compared to our extinct cousins like Neanderthals, modern humans have flatter faces, smaller jaws, reduced brow ridges, and more juvenile or gracile features, all consistent with the traits seen in domesticated species. Genomic comparisons even suggest that some of the same genes involved in tameness in dogs and foxes show signs of selection in humans. On the hormonal level, domesticated species, including possibly ourselves, tend to show lower baseline cortisol, the stress hormone, changes in oxytocin and serotonin systems, which regulate bonding and mood, and less reactive amygdalae, the brain's fear centers. In short, self-domestication may have helped humans become not just more social, but more empathetic, emotionally intelligent, and able to cooperate in large groups. Traits that underpin everything from storytelling to civilization. So the next time you look at a dog's floppy ears or a human's baby-like
That
face,
goddamn motherfucker
remember,
bringing out that
taming the
goddamn
wild
whore.
may have been a two-way street. The expansion pack to humanity. Now, you might be wondering, if this alliance was so revolutionary, where's the proof? Why don't we find more sites with early dogs in graves, for example? Well, we do find some of that. For example, the remains of 26 dogs have been found across 4 different sites in the northern Iberian Peninsula, sometimes going as close as sharing their graves with humans. We've also found
God damn it.
14,000-year-old graves where dogs were buried with humans in Bonn Oberkassel, not as tools, but as family. One puppy was laid to rest in a grave, cradled in its owner's arm. Treating them as family isn't just some weird social media trend you can see on Instagram, #dogmom. It goes way back. across ancient Europe and Asia, cave paintings and carvings show dogs running alongside hunters. It's one of the weirdest facts hiding inside you right now. Inside of all of us, actually. A recent study published very recently, March 18th of 2025 to be precise, has discovered something very wild about our DNA. But approximately 20% of it comes from a population way more archaic than we first thought. Every single cell in your body, whether it's part of your skin, your bones, your brain, or your blood, carries a full copy of your DNA. Nothing new here. There's roughly 6 feet of DNA crammed into a nucleus only a few microns wide, coiled and compacted with almost incomprehensible precision. The amount of sheer information stocked inside of you is even more insane than what you think. If you stretched out all the DNA in your body end to end, it would reach the moon and back over 250,000 times. Your genome is made up of about 3.2 billion base pairs, A's, T's, C's, and G's, that together form the instruction manual for building and running a human being. If all of it was digital, it would take about 1.5 gigabytes of storage, which is about the same size as the entire install file for the original Half-Life. Everything it takes to build you could fit on the hard drive of a 1990s gaming PC, right next to crowbars and headcrabs. And for the past few decades, scientists have been obsessively trying to decipher just that. They were so obsessed that back in 1990, a project was launched to fully sequence the human DNA, the Human Genome Project. One technological progress after the other, it successfully reached that goal in 2003, over 13 years later. It involved more than 20 institutions across 6 countries, and cost about $3 billion. Today, thanks to the new technological leaps, the same thing can be performed in less than 24 hours, for about $200. We've learned a lot and became pretty efficient. We now know that about 1.5% of your genome actually codes for proteins, the structural and functional molecules that make life happen. Another 8% comes from ancient viral infections, genetic hitchhikers from the deep past. About 10% of regulatory DNA manages when, where, and how much your genes are expressed. And the biggest chunk, somewhere around 60%, is made up of repetitive sequences, stuttering copies of the same fragments over and over, like a scratched record.
God
Now,
damn it.
back to the topic at hand. If we know so much, what's so wild about these 20%? Well, the thing is, contrary to what we've been thinking most of our history, we do not come from one human ancestry. A fifth of our DNA is coming from a human population we diverged from 1.5 million years ago. That's roughly 600 million base pairs, equivalent to the entire genome of a mouse, or 4 times the genome of a fruit fly, just sitting there. This might not sound like much stated like this, but take back 20% of us, and we're rendered completely useless. And when you think about it, it's very disturbing. We mixed with Neanderthals and Denisovans a lot more recently, and still, we got 1 to 5% of their DNA, depending on your ancestry. And despite such a huge percentage, we know absolutely nothing about these guys. No remains, no fossil record, nothing corresponds to what we found. It's as if evolution wrote the story of life, and then buried a secret chapter in every one of us. And to this day, the question remains, where are those 20% coming from? How did it got there in the first place? This is what we're going to look into in today's video.
Did she have Jules Scott's arms?
This is what
Has she got Jules Scott's arms? She's cute. I'm sorry, I gotta screenshot her. Has she got Jules Scott's arms? With Jules Scott.
This is what we're going to look into in today's video.
With the surf,
A puzzle.
With the
This is what we're going to look into in today's video.
Arm. With Pit.
A puzzle in the code. It's nothing new anymore. We're going to look into in today's video.
Pit.
A puzzle in the code.
Pit.
It's nothing new anymore that we, modern humans, have inherited parts of other hominins' DNA. Non-African populations and descendants inherited between 1 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA. Neanderthal emerged approximately 500,000 years ago and lived alongside Homo sapiens in Europe, Middle East, and Western Asia.
Christ.
Sometimes
Jesus
alternating the
fucking
occupation of
Christ.
the lands, sometimes coexisting there. Sites like Kapse and Skul in modern-day Israel
Jesus
show that
goddamn
both Homo
fucking
sapiens
Christ.
and Neanderthals occupied the region at different times. possibly trading places over thousands of years. In Europe, Neanderthals were already occupying the space when sapiens arrived around 45,000 to 50,000 years ago. The overlapping of the presence of both species lasted at least 5,000 years, possibly way longer, especially in the Middle East and Asia. Denisovans, the second archaic hominid we have DNA traces in us, is less widely spread. Actually, it's only present in Melanesian populations, Philippine breeder groups, or some East Asian populations, ranging from 0.1% up to 6% at most, especially for Melanesians.
Jesus.
Since we found parts of their DNA within us, we know that interbreeding occurred with Homo sapiens. We even have proof that Neanderthals and Denisovans interbred with each other, as backed by the remains of Denny, a teenage girl that lived 90,000 years ago, who was a hybrid of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, who himself had Neanderthal...
Boop, boop, I touched her head.
Who was a hybrid of a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father, who himself had Neanderthal ancestry from previous generations. Even with the recency bias in genetics, that more recent interbreeding are less diluted in subsequent offsprings. Despite all this happening at least 200,000 years earlier than our encounter with both archaic hominids, we still have only 1 to 6% of their DNA at most. Now that all of this has been laid as the groundwork, we mentioned a specific study at the beginning of this video, published in Nature on March 18, 2025. This study bases its conclusions on data from the 1,000 Genomes Project, which describes itself as a catalog of common human genetic variation, using
my dear sir, have
samples
just fucked up,
from people who declare themselves to be healthy. What's actually pretty cool about this project is that anyone can browse through the data they collected for free.
You stupid
I
motherfucker.
strongly encourage you to go and check it out.
You
If you're
stupid
curious enough,
motherfucker.
I'll put the link in the description of this video for those
You
interested.
stupid
Back to our topic.
motherfucker.
Based on these data, here's the story found in our DNA. 1.5 million years ago, two human populations diverged from each other.
Stupid.
One composes 80% of the modern human current
Stupid
DNA.
motherfucker.
This is probably the
stupid
population that gave
machine.
birth to Neanderthals and
Stupid,
Denisovans as well.
stupid idiot.
The other is the one that's composing the remaining 20% of our DNA. And it's coming from this ghost population.
Idiot.
1.5 million years ago is the point of divergence between us. At that point in time, Homo ergaster was roaming around in Africa since approximately 1.9 million years ago, so a good 400,000 years prior to the split. Homo ergaster is mainly considered by the scientific community to be the earliest form of Homo erectus. It had more modern body proportions, long legs, short arms, a slimmer build than later Homo erectus, and thinner skull bones, with brow ridges less pronounced. And there was another contender for the throne of hominins, Homo erectus.
You stupid fucker. You stupid fucker. You stupid fucker. God damn it. Back to this fucking shit again, you goddamn son of a bitch. Come on, you dick sucker. Come on, you flaming fucking goddamn dick sucker from China. Suck my dick, bitch. Suck my motherfucking slut. You stupid goddamn motherfucker.
Happy little shmups. For any retro gaming fan, just say the word shmup and they'll know exactly what you're talking about. Shmup or shoot 'em ups, for people who have the time to say all the words, have been big business for arcades since almost the beginning. All you have to do is go back to 1978 when an itty-bitty black and white game revolutionized the industry and took the world by storm.
You stupid
No,
fucker.
I'm not talking about robot bowling. The game that started the shmup industry was Space Invaders. It was such a phenomenon that for a long time a rumor was going around that it actually created a yen shortage in Japan. In the last 35 years, it has been said that it was just a rumor, but even still, the game was a smash success.
I gotta get rid of those
Today,
fucking poems.
we are going to take a look at Namco's addition to the shoot 'em up genre, Galaga.
goddamn poems.
What movie
Goddamn
inspired one of the
dick
play
shit,
mechanics
mother
in this
dick,
game?
Goddamn rags,
Let's
bitch.
find out as we learn about the history of
Goddamn
Galaga.
buck, god dick shit, mother
When
dick.
retro
goddamn
gamers
rags,
speak about
bitch.
classic shoot-'em-ups from the golden age of arcades, players tend to put Space Invaders and Galaga towards the top of their list.
Suck my dick,
I
bitch.
can't go any further until I talk about Galaxian, which was Namco's official entry into the field. Galaxian is a fixed shooter which was released in 1979 and holds the distinction of being one of the first games to feature RGB color graphics and to use a tile-based hardware system. Space Invaders was black and white, which used color cellophane on the bezel and painted backdrops to simulate color. When arcade goers got their first glimpse at Galaxian in all its glorified color, they were hooked like a newborn lamb to a teat. From the get-go, the bosses at Namco wanted to make the best post-Invaders game possible, which put a lot of pressure on the team. The gameplay is very similar to Space Invaders, in which you control the starship having to clear each round of aliens. They appear in formation at the top of the screen and will dive bomb the bottom while shooting projectiles in order to hit your ship. The game was a huge success for the company and was second in earnings in 1979 behind Space Invaders. Almost immediately, the higher-ups at Namco wanted to put out a sequel using the same hardware board as Galaxian to save on costs. According to legendary Namco designer Shigeru Yokoyama, Galaga did indeed start out as a sequel to Galaxian. Mr. Yokoyama would go on to create a number of classics for Namco, including Splatterhouse, Ridge Racer Revolution, Ridge Racer, Ridge Racer Revolution, and Ace Combat 3. According to Mr. Yokoyama, Galaxian and Galaga are completely different games. Galaga started out because we wanted to create one more space shooter that was like Galaxian, and we were actually using the same arcade board as well. After we started using the new board, the specs came back better, so we began to create a brand new product proposal. The new arcade board was named the Galaga, and a couple of other big name games used it as well, including Bosconian and Dig Dug. The tractor beam that is used in this game by the enemy was inspired by the tractor beam that was seen in Star Wars in 1977. Initially, rescuing a captured ship would give the player an extra life, but they changed it to having it fight along your existing ship for a little dual shooter action. The challenging stages started out life as a glitch that was discovered during the testing phase. At this point, they decided to explore it and also wanted to give the players a breather and allow them to rack up bonus points. Similar to the intermissions of Pac-Man and bonus stages of Rally X. The development time took longer than a usual game, as Namco had a laid-back corporate structure at the time and wanted the team to put out the best product they could. During the testing phase, it didn't prove very popular in arcades due to the game being too easy. The developers went back and increased the difficulty, turning it into the game we know and love today. During development, the higher-ups wanted to include an instruction card on the cabinet. During development, the higher-ups wanted to include an instruction card on the cabinet, letting players know how to play the game. Galaga fired its way into the arcades in 1981.
Galaga
As the
sucks.
story goes, it's pretty flimsy. The insect alien forces known as Galaga are taking over the galaxy, and it's up to you and your spaceship to blast them to Kingdom Come for good. A few years ago, in conjunction with the 35th anniversary of Galaga, the Galaga League was created by Namco. This officially puts the 4 core games all in the same lineage, which includes Galaxian, Galaga, Gaplus, and Galaga 88. While Galaga may look similar to Galaxian and even use some of the same assets, there are a lot of big differences that really improve the gameplay. For example, your ship can now fire multiple bullets at once, which you will definitely need because the enemies are swooping down like a crackhead on payday. Before joining up in formation at the top, the enemies arrive off-screen in various attack patterns, giving you the option to shoot them if you are fast enough. In the early stages, they won't attack you, so you can shoot as many as you can. Once the enemy formation is complete, they will start their dive bomb attacks similar to Galaxian. At the top of the formation are 4 boss Galaga ships which take 2 shots to destroy. These alien ships have tractor beams that can capture your ship, returning it to the top of the formation. When this happens, you will essentially lose a life, so if this is done on your last remaining player, then the game is over. However, gameplay continues, and if you are able to shoot the boss Galaga that holds your ship as it is diving towards you, the fighter is rescued and you are now able to use it as a dual fighter with dual firepower. In addition to the dual ship, your hitbox is now twice what it was before, so you must be extra careful. You also have to watch out because if you shoot it while it's still in formation, the fighter will turn rogue and join the Galaga force. After successfully clearing each stage of the alien forces, you continue on to the next stage where the difficulty is increased just a bit. Every few stages you are presented with a challenging stage, which allows you to gain bonus points for as many fighters you can shoot. Thankfully for this stage, the enemy fighters have lost their mojo and will not be firing at you. There are 40 enemies in total, and if you are able to shoot them all for a perfect score, you are awarded additional bonus points. The further into the game you go, the more difficult the game becomes. Each screen that you clear is indicated by a marker in the lower right-hand corner. There is no ending screen, so the game will continue indefinitely until you die. In the lower right-hand corner. There is no ending screen, so the game will continue indefinitely until you die. The arcade game was a huge hit for Namco, and it maintained a spot in the top 10 on the earnings chart for the next 4 years, which was quite a feat for an arcade game at the time. A number of home conversions were produced, which I will cover at the end of the video. Development on a sequel to Galaga was started straight away, and they wanted to take everything that was great about Galaga and bump it up a notch, and that included the difficulty. Gaplus, or Galaga Plus, or Galaga 3 as it was known in later arcade revisions, was released in 1984. Numerous additions to the Galaga style of gameplay were included, with the big one being your ability to move your ship in any direction. You are not just confined from moving it left to right, you can move it up and down as well, giving you much more freedom. That freedom does come at a price though, because the closer you get to the enemies, the easier it is for them to kill you. The other major addition to the gameplay is the ability to use a tractor beam and hijack ships and use them as your own wingmen. 5 enemies can fight alongside you and will stay there until they are shot down by their brothers. The bonus stages have also been overhauled, in which enemies can constantly be juggled in order to spell out the word bonus. It's not much, but it's very cool to put your Galaga skills to use. Speaking of, this Galaga is on meth. The action gets fast and furious, especially when you have 5 additional fight.
God damn it.
has something he wants to tell you. Ted sat across from his wife, but his face was not the confident face of the man she had just walked in with. Ted looked into Gail's eyes and told her the truth. Everything Mike Jones claimed had occurred was true. Using of the illegal substance, the sexual encounters, and the late-night meetings. And Ted had something more to say. It wasn't just Mike. Ted then implied some of his behavior was Gail's fault. Ted told her how on one particular occasion when he was attending a church event in Cripple Creek, Colorado, he texted Gail and asked her to join him. Gail was busy hosting a new... As the cousin of a famous rock and roll musician, Jimmy Lee Swaggart was determined to get some of that wealth and fame for himself, all through the hands of God. He started a church and got himself a radio show in the 1960s, but...
Baby, put my face, I'm a basket cake. Baby, put my face, fuck my back so you will love me, but instead you stood above, you spit me out, you kick me down. I hate your name.